Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the Farside Podcast. I'm your host, Landon Majcher, and we're going to get right into it. All right, so we're going to be doing it a little differently than we did last week, kind of almost a reversal, so to speak. Last week, if you tuned into last Friday's episode, you will know that I interviewed Noah Davidson about his YouTube channel, NTD Films. This week, we're going to switch it up, and Noah Davidson's going to be joining us again, but this time he's going to be interviewing me about two different things. The first being a novel I wrote and then published, not really, but released, I guess, back in February of this year. And the second being a expose on Condor Productions and Parker Smith, which is set to release just coming up next Monday. June 28th is the date of release for that. So I'm going to welcome Noah Davidson back to the podcast here, and then he's going to take it away with the interview. Hello, Noah.
Hello, Landon. It's good to be back here.
Yeah, great to have you back.
Okay, so yeah, like Landon said, I'm going to be interviewing him about his novel, The Heatwave, and I guess we'll just get right into that first. So a summary for The Heatwave, if you guys don't know, is a record-breaking heatwave has been striking the world for the past 3 weeks. Aside from lots of sweating and an increase in air conditioning bills, it's harmless. Then, the heat fries all computers and electricity worldwide, causing everything to shut down and creating an international blackout. As long, dreadful hours in the dark stretch into days, people begin to panic and turn to violence for answers. 15-year-old Sam McNelson and his family are in the middle of it all, and will watch as society crumbles, families become torn apart and destroyed, and the fight for survival becomes all too real. With neighbors turning on each other and friends becoming enemies, Sam quickly realizes no one can be trusted. So that's the summary, and now getting into my actual questions for you. The first question is, what inspired you to write The Heatwave?
All right, so there were a couple things that inspired me to write this book, and the first being the fact that I wanted to write an apocalyptic, dystopian, end-of-the-world type of book. I'd been wanting to do that for a little while prior to starting this book, and I actually started writing this book in March of 2020, and I'd probably been wanting to do that for a few months back. The second being COVID-19 hit in March of 2020 here in North America. It hit and everything kind of shut down, and all of a sudden I had a lot of free time. And I think I mentioned this in episode 6 of the Farside Podcast, season 1. I mentioned how all of a sudden, like, everything I was doing, all my extracurricular events and everything shut down or were postponed. And so I had a bunch of free time, and it gave me opportunity to plan and really start thinking about this book, and then eventually allowed me to start writing it. And the third thing being, I finally figured out like the kind of disaster that happens in the heat wave, which is a power outage, through a series of novels I read about 5 years back now. It was 4 years at the time, called the Rule of Three series, written by Eric Walters. And I really enjoyed this series. I really liked the concept of a power outage, a widespread power outage. So I definitely wanted to make that a big part of this book I was writing, and that's how I got the idea.
So why, out of all the potential disasters to write about, why did you choose the power outage?
Well, I guess there's several reasons I guess I decided to make it a power outage. The biggest one being the Rule of Three series, of course. I really enjoyed that series, and I love the idea of it. It was very interesting, yet also super scary at the same time, and that really intrigued me. I also like the idea of it because it's not a zombie apocalypse. It's not a meteor racing towards Earth. It's not some giant explosion or war. It's something a little more slow and gradual, and it's a kind of unique disaster, but the effects can be just as bad, if not worse. And so I found that very interesting. I also find it to be kind of underrated. I mean, there's hundreds of movies and books out there about a zombie apocalypse or about a meteor hitting Earth. You know, we've seen that before hundreds of times. It's almost a cliche at this point. With a power outage, a widespread power outage like this, it's a little less heard of. There's not as much out there about it. And so it gave me the opportunity to write something a little different. I already mentioned that something about this concept does intrigue me but terrifies me, so there was that. And then with this catastrophe, if you want to call it that, there is no bang, no sudden explosion that signals the end of the world. Rather, it's a very slow and gradual and painful death. And as the saying goes, it would kind of be like going out with a whimper and not a bang. So I guess that's kind of a very long-winded answer, and there's a lot of reasons I chose this disaster, but that would be my answer.
Okay, so my next question for you is, while the events that take place in the novel obviously are fictional, do you think it's at all realistic to believe that something like this could happen in our world today?
No, it's not at all unrealistic. Like, it's not unrealistic to believe that something like this could happen. What I will say before I even get into what we could see is it would never happen from a heat wave. Like, that's unfortunately not scientifically possible. It just doesn't work like that. Had I done a little more research, maybe I could have chosen a different way to create this chaos, this incident. But a heat wave's not likely how it's going to happen. I'm going to mention three other ways we could see something similar to this. The first and most likely, and when I say most likely, I don't mean it's super likely, I just mean it's possible, is a cyber attack on the power grid. And this would be a smaller scale thing. It would not nearly be as devastating in the results. It would not have the devastating results that the one does in this novel, because vehicles, cell phones, laptops, they would all still work. It would just be like a regular power outage. So refrigeration, electricity, lights, stuff that needs to plug into an outlet would cease to work, but everything else would still operate. And I read a book on this actually just recently, and I'm gonna show it here to everyone. I hope you can see it. It's Lights Out here by Ted Koppel, and it's a pretty good book. It's a nonfiction investigative journalism, and it basically goes into talks about a cyber attack, how it could happen, what are the chances of it, what it would look like, and what the consequences would be. The second type of disaster that could trigger a power outage would be a solar flare or solar storm. Now, this could have more significant and harsh consequences, and this actually did happen in Quebec in 1989. A solar storm hit and power was out for only 12 hours across the province, so this was very small scale, but it could be far worse and far more damaging. And then the third is called an EMP, or an electromagnetic pulse. Not sure if anyone's heard of this one. It's a little more rare, and it's definitely it's the most devastating of the three, but the most unlikely. This disaster, I'm not really good at explaining what it is, how it works. So I'm just going to say this right now. This disaster is covered very well in a 2009 book titled 1 Second After, which I read just this past winter. So if you want to find out more about that, you can either just Google EMPs or you can read that book. But this would knock out everything. It would knock out vehicles. It would knock out cell phones. Just like in the heat wave, everything would be off the grid. So it'd be exactly what we saw in the heat wave. So yeah, that's my answer there. Again, very long-winded. Sorry, I apologize. But it is not unrealistic. I still would say it is unlikely though.
It's funny you say EMP is the most unlikely one, because that's like the one I actually know the most, because that happens all the time in like movies and TV shows and stuff. Like, just,
The media uses it a
yeah.
lot, yeah, but the chances of it are the least unlikely of the three.
And the way you describe solar flares, wouldn't a solar flare kind of act like a heat wave? So
That
maybe
would,
maybe
yeah,
it could be.
maybe exactly. Maybe that's what the heat wave is. Yeah.
Okay, so next question here. How realistic do you think that the novel is in terms of how things unfold in the days, weeks, and months after the power goes out?
Um, it's realistic to an extent, I guess. It's missing the mark in certain areas, though. I mean, I could have expanded a lot more. The novel itself is, I think, 58,000 words. Easily could have been 75,000. If I had known then what I know now about these types of things, and if I'd read and researched what I've read and researched now, I could have expanded so much more. I guess I'm going to be a little nitpicky and just kind of dive into a few examples. So the biggest thing for me that annoys me about this novel, looking back on it, is the fact that Sam's neighborhood has this just abundance of food. Like, they just seem to not really have this huge problem with food. That's not how it works. They would be forced to ration a lot more than they are. And like, I didn't really talk about this much, but they'd all be losing lots of weight, and they'd have very little energy or strength, and several other side effects, of course, from the lack of proper calories. And they just, like, they never really talk about that. They like talk about how there's a grocery store and they're farming and all this and that, but really, when you think about it, it doesn't really work like that. Um, The next thing I guess that I wish I'd touched on, and I know in my video it's private, I might unprivate it soon here on Farside, but there's the reader thank you video I did. Noah, you've watched that, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and I talked about the disease and the fake fictional disease, which I titled the heat disease in this novel. Um, no, that's not realistic, but there would be a lot of disease, and it would come in the form of flu, food poisoning, amongst many other small common diseases that would be running rampant due to the lack of proper sanitation. This would account for a large majority of deaths from a global or nationwide power outage. It would be very devastating, especially early on, because within weeks you'd see these diseases starting to spread, and it would be, yeah, the results would be devastating. Another thing I didn't quite hit was the rise of gangs and cults, specifically religious cults, whatever you want, so be it, holding strange beliefs that, like, I guess the most common one you hear about probably in movies and books is like, this is our punishment from God, right? That kind of stuff. And other groups trying to survive. So Sam's neighborhood in this story only gets attacked really, they get attacked twice, but only really once. Realistically, they'd be getting attacked a lot more, and it would just be by people who are, desperate for food or power or whatever. They'd be coming in and attacking, and we'd be seeing things like people sneaking into the communities at nights and breaking into homes, and killing the people in the homes for food and stuff. um, I wish, in hindsight, of course, I'd incorporated some of that into this novel. Unfortunately, obviously, I didn't know what I know now. So, maybe if I ever do a rewrite or something, I have that opportunity.
So basically, you just want darker and more serious consequences, is what you would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Just want to expand a little more.
Okay. So I've got one more question for you, and that is, what would be like your favorite moment in the novel? Either just like writing it, you liked it, or just like reading wise, you liked it. Just what would be your favorite moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess, well, I'll reference two specific scenarios. In my reader thank you video, I referenced chapter 5 as being a turning point for me when writing, because when I was writing this novel, the first four chapters for me, the first three chapters are primarily intro, so not a lot happens. We get introduced to Sam, a couple of his neighbors, his family, his friends, and that's about it. It's very intro level. But then when we get into chapter 4 and 5, that's where the story starts to take place. The inciting incident actually happens in chapter 4, and then the story takes off from there. And when going into chapter 5, things weren't really working out for the story. It was kind of looking like it might not go anywhere. And then I wrote chapter 5, and that kind of all changed. I don't really, like I said in my reader thank you video, that I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it is that changed for me, but something about that chapter, I really enjoyed writing it. It's still one of my favorite chapters looking back on the book now. It's just something about that chapter really, I think it really helped the novel take off. And I guess I'll also reference another thing I really enjoyed writing is Matthew's death. A huge spoiler, so I apologize. But Matthew's death is it's a huge plot twist in the story. Noah, you've read it. I'm not sure if you remember it, but I'll just quickly let everyone know. Basically, what happens is Sam is about to be shot by the main antagonist's sidekick. Um, and Matthew is supposedly a dead guard of the villain. It's a long story. I won't explain it all. But Matthew's basically there. Sam doesn't know Matthew's there, and Matthew shoots the sidekick who's about to kill Sam. But Matthew's also been shot just a few moments earlier before Sam arrived, and so Matthew dies. And that scene for me, that was not planned. Like, I can't remember for sure, but I think Matthew was always supposed to die, but not in that sense. That scene got added very late into the book, kind of last minute, and I started taking off with that idea. And it ended up being, for me, one of the strongest, most emotionally and just plot wise, one of the strongest moments in this novel.
Okay, and I know I said that was the last question, but I actually came up with another one here.
Okay.
So there's quite a few references in this novel to just like your personal life and people that you know. Would you like to explain some of those, or just explain the thought process including those?
For sure. Um, so actually, I had originally decided I wasn't going to do a lot of references in this book when I started writing it. The biggest reference in this book that was originally in the first draft was the neighbor Earl's character is based off of one of my friend's neighbors who I met last summer. I got to meet last summer. I think I met him actually last winter. of 2020, winter of 2020, and then I worked with him again last summer on a short film. And I decided to base a character off of him. And so Earl is based off of that character. And then I guess as far as it goes for the smaller references, I know the ones you're kind of trying to get at there. And those are the ones, most of those were put in chapters 1 to 3, the intro chapters. And I decided to add those references in while editing because the first 3 chapters were excruciatingly boring, and I didn't really like them. So I realized I needed something to like spice it up. I needed a little more references is what I decided, but I need some more development, some more like backstory, little things here and there to put in just to make the story a little more entertaining to help readers get through those first 3 chapters and into the actual story. And so I started to add in all these references from, yes, my personal life. I had some references with to do with some of my friends. There was a character slightly, a very minor character based off of Noah in there, a very small character, but Noah was in there. And I had a couple of my other friends in there. And yeah, I just included basically all the references are within the first 3 chapters. And yeah, I just put those in there to make them a little more entertaining.
Okay, so anyone who's reading it, see if you guys can catch what it is. I don't, probably they won't be able to, only like me and you and our friends are, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to see. But anyways, that's it for the heat wave. Now we're going to go on to the much anticipated Condor expose. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick summary here, and then we'll get into the questions. In only 1 year, Condor Productions owner and creator Parker Smith starved 4 actors on the film shoot, recklessly vandalized his friend's video equipment, and also burned down another friend's house. Sorry, almost burned down another friend's house. The story of Condor Productions' eventful inaugural year and the madman behind it all. So, very exciting stuff that seems to be coming up here. And so my first question is, where and when did the idea of writing this expose on Condor Productions begin, and how long did it take you to write it?
All right. So yeah, the idea actually hit me one day when I was just sitting around the house somewhere. I don't even remember what I was doing. I might have been eating or doing homework or just doing something, not really a lot of anything. And I started thinking back to being on set because this came to me probably early March, and it had been about 5 months since I'd been on set. The last time I'd been on set was Sleep No More, as I mentioned in the first episode of the Farside Podcast. And I started thinking back to it, and I remembered, of course, Parker, almost burning down your house on Sleep No More. And then I also remembered, the farm shoot, and I'm like, oh, Parker also, starved everyone there. And then, of course, the tripod, and I put the 3 incidents together, and I'm like he's ruined 3 different like shoots. Like he's on the hook here for 3 different things. And I realized I had to do something about it. And my original idea was to just write like some small, simple news article about it. Kind of go take it from like a journalist approach and just write like some sort of, like you'd see in like a newspaper or whatever. And then it later afterwards developed to an expose. So I started research and planning, I guess, in March. Research was pretty simple. Like I had to research what was the tripod cost, when did I buy it. So I had to go back through all my orders on Amazon and find, when did I buy it, how much did it cost. I had to figure out what Parker's camera is, what type it is, what the name was. I had to, kind of figure out little things like that. And then I began writing the expose in about mid-March. And it took me about 2 months to write. I finished it in the middle of May. But really, it could have taken me a lot less. There would be like days or weeks where I'd write a lot and then I'd go an entire week without touching it. So it was just kind of like I was really busy with school at that point, and a lot of other little things that were just kind of nagging at me. So I didn't really have the time to focus on this expose. But I finished it by the middle of May, and then I was editing pretty much for a couple of weeks until the beginning of June.
Okay, and so there are 3 specific events covered in this expose. Can you give us a rundown of what the 3 events are and why you chose to write about these 3 in particular?
Yeah, okay. So the first event covered in this expose is Parker Smith breaking a tripod last summer on set of the Farside Podcast. He was on set, if you guys remember, if you watched the first season, he was on for episodes 3 and 4 with me and Noah. And I think it was while we were filming those episodes, he had broke a tripod. I'm not going to go into the little details only because this hasn't released and I want to save it for readers, but he broke a tripod, so there's that incident. The second incident covers an event that took place on a One Mission 2 Rise of Crane shoot, which is a big film of Condor Productions that's yet to release. It's been in production for, I think, a year and a half now. And this shoot was located on a cast member's uncle's farm, and this took place in last September. And this event, I kind of in the expose, I referred to it as the farm shoot because that's kind of what it's known as. And then the third event talks about how Parker almost burned down NTD Films' old studio. And this was while shooting Sleep No More, which is a short film slash infomercial Noah made back in, I guess it released in December of 2020. And we talked about that also on episode 1. So yeah, that was the third incident. And yeah, those are, I guess, the 3 incidents covered in this expose.
Yeah, you guys can actually, if you see, I want to say it's the bloopers of Sleep No More, you can actually see Parker burn down the house. So if you're looking for something to prep, I'll shout that out right now. Go check that out. But anyways, which of these events was the hardest to write about, and which do you think was the easiest to write about?
Yeah, so the hardest would probably be the farm shoot, um, solely because there was so much to cover. There's so many little details, little things, and angles I could have taken with this story, and I wanted to make sure I got it right. It's the biggest of the 3 stories by far. I kind of call it the meat of the story or the main course of the expose, only because it's like, yeah, it probably makes up almost 50% of the actual expose. And Noah, you've read that, so you can probably attest it's the biggest
Yeah,
story,
yeah, it's
right?
definitely by far the biggest one.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure I got it right. I wanted to make sure, I took the right approach to it. And that would probably be why that was the hardest. As far as it goes for easiest, the easiest for me was the tripod destruction on the Farside podcast. It's a super short and simple. It's not a very long part of the expose. And for some reason, despite it being the oldest of the 3 incidents, it was the clearest in memory for me. However, I will say, when I was going through and editing these 3 events, of the 3, that was probably my least favorite. I probably did the worst job of the 3 on that one.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. Like, none of them are bad, but I think that one's the less entertaining, you want to call it, maybe, of the 3.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, burning down a house and like starving actors, a little more exciting than breaking a tripod. But that's just my personal opinion here.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've worked with Condor Productions, the head person, which is Parker Smith, on several different short films and video projects, including Haunted, Parkernoid, One Mission, Laugh Track, and many others. And you've even had him on the podcast, like you've said, as a guest a couple of times, and even as a co-host, stealing my job once. But in your experience, what is it like working with Parker? And has he always been this cruel and destructive on film sets?
Yes. Yes, he's always been this cruel and destructive on film sets. As far as I recall, he has been. I'll just cite a few examples off the top of my head. On Haunted, which is a production on Farside Films, you can find it. He wouldn't leave my house. Basically, we had scheduled the shoot. First of all, I didn't even want to do it. He wanted to do it on a Friday. I didn't want to do it on a Friday because the new NHL, I think it was NHL 20 at the time, was coming out that day. And I didn't want to do it that day. I said, no, can we do it on the Saturday? But he insisted we do it on the Friday. So I agreed. I said, okay, fine. We'll do it on the Friday. So we scheduled the shoot for Friday at 4, and we had planned 4 to 6. And that was, set in stone. That was the goal. We were going to be done by 6. He was going to leave my house by 6. 6 o'clock rolls around. We're not done. He's not leaving. I said, we can shoot another day. It's no big deal. He wouldn't leave. And it was 7:30 by the time he left my house. My parents, not impressed. Me, not impressed. It was just a bad situation. He would not leave my house. We considered calling the cops, but we let him off easy that time. The second incident I'm going to cite is the one on Laugh Track. Noah, you're very familiar with this. He broke a softbox on Laugh Track. He basically was doing a scene, and I told him, just pretend to punch the softbox. We'll do the rest. Just punch it lightly. He full swing, full punch, breaks the light inside. It shatters it everywhere. So,
And I
he's always
believe
been.
he didn't repay that, did he?
No, he
No,
hasn't. He's
no.
never repaid me for anything. Not my time, not my equipment. He's broken. He has not compensated me at all. So yeah, he's always been that destructive. He's always been that cruel. Working with him is all right. He can be funny. He really can. He is super helpful. He has very good knowledge of film equipment, all the technical stuff. He's very helpful in that regard. I mean, Noah, you would know that. Um, so he's very good there, but there's a flip side. He's very short-tempered. He's easily angered. He doesn't have much patience for his cast or crew members, and he's not very careful with others' equipment. He'll treat his equipment with the utmost respect, but when it comes to your equipment, just keep it as far away as you can from him because if he gets a hold of it, the results are not going to be pretty.
Yeah, I remember because we shot Change yesterday, and at one point he had his hands on my camera, and I was like, Parker, what are you doing? Because he was trying to set the tripod, and then he started taking the camera off and was like
Unbelievable.
tearing at it, and like I was like, oh no, this is going to be a repeat of the Farside podcast. He's going to break my tripod. So like I had to take the camera from him, and it's just
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable.
he's just a menace on set sometimes.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on to the next question here. I know you would like to see Parker get exposed by this expose. You'd like to see it make a difference on people, but do you think people will actually start to see Parker for who he actually is after the expose? Or will they continue to just love him and just completely write off your remarks and just like not even care?
Yeah. There will be some who will be persuaded to, maybe look at Condor in a different light, and see, the other side of him for sure. There will be some people. However, for the most part, I don't think this expose will quite do what I want it to do. Obviously, my goal with it is to show people who Parker Smith really is and show them that he's not just this charming, funny, humorous, friendly guy. I mean, he is those things, but he's also hot-headed, disrespectful to others' equipment, very cruel and unsympathetic and cold to castmates and cast members. He's all those things too, and people don't see that in him. So, well, I do want that to be what happens. I do want people to see both sides. I think for the most part, most of his true hardcore fans are going to stay Condornians, whatever he calls them. I don't know what he calls them, but they're going to stay true to him. And then, there'll be a few people who will, maybe see both sides, but I don't think it'll be an overly large transition or have an overly large response.
And that's quite unfortunate because like
Yeah.
you and I, we both know it, and it's just no one else is going to see it that way, and it's just unfortunate that he's just going to continue his reign of terror on everyone.
Exactly, yeah.
So one final question here. How do you think Parker will react to the expose? Because I know he's been told that it's coming, and he seems to just like not even care. He's like, oh, I've done nothing wrong. There's nothing for you to expose. But do you think once he does read it and sees what you're exposing for, do you think it will change both your professional and your casual relationship with him?
Um, yeah, so I think Parker, he's definitely cocky about it. He's definitely brushing it off. He's like, he doesn't think it's going to be anything. I mean, he thinks he's going to walk away from it without a scratch. And hopefully that's not the case. I think our professional careers will definitely suffer as a result of this expose. I definitely don't foresee us ever having the same professional relationship we once had. Our casual relationship, because this is mostly like all the shots I take at him are generally with his professional career. I'm not taking any personal shots to him. That's low. That's not really necessary. I try to stay away from that. I'm taking shots at what he does professionally when he's at work on sets. So professionally, I think our careers will suffer greatly. As our casual relationship, our friendship goes, I think it will remain. It might be, there might be a little bit of a scratch left, but I think we can work past that. I think for sure.
Okay, so that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you'd like to say about either the expose or about your novel, The Heat Wave, either or, before we head into a commercial break here?
Sure. So I guess with the Heat Wave, if you are interested, anyone out there who has not read the book, if you are interested, feel free to contact me on Instagram at Farside Films, or you can email me. I'm not going to give you my email though. So yeah. Okay, so you can contact me on Instagram at Farside Films, or you can contact me here in the comment section down below or through YouTube somehow. Um, Also, the expose will be coming out June 28th. So don't forget, if you want to read it again, you can contact me through Instagram or through YouTube, and I will make sure to send you a copy. And yeah, that's about it. So I guess we'll be going to ad break now. Is that right, Noah?
Yeah, we'll be going to ad break, and when we come back, we will be reviewing Rocky. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Are you tired of wasting several hours every day sleeping? If the answer is yes, then boy do I have the drug for you. Introducing Sleep No More, created by Say Tan, founder and CEO of Devil's Drugs. Sleep No More is a brand new drug that allows you to feel as though you slept a full 8 hours without ever having to close your eyes. Taking just one pill will give the consumer enough energy for the entire day. With those kind of benefits, how could you not try this product? Buy Sleep No More today. You'll be damned if you don't.
Hi, this is Jake, and you're listening to my latest single, Pain of the Past. If you fuck with what you're hearing, check this shit out on Apple Music, Spotify, or the iTunes Store.
So Condor Productions is more or less just a place for me to upload all my videos, just in case I lose the files. Shut the fuck up. Yeah, let me just give it a Sage X spin.
Oh my Jesus!
Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed those ads. Like I said before, we are going to be reviewing Rocky today. And before we actually get into the review, here's just some general information. The release year was 1976. The rating is PG. The runtime is 1 hour 59 minutes. The main genres of the film is action and adventure, drama, and then sports drama. It was directed by John V. Avildsen. Apologize if I mispronounced that name. It stars Sylvester Stallone, Talia Shear, Burt Young, Carl Weathers, Burgess Meredith, Thayer David, and Joe Spinell. And then just a quick film summary is Rocky Balboa, a small-time boxer, gets a chance to fight a heavyweight champion, Apollo Creed. In a bid to earn respect and glory, Rocky jumps into the ring, unaware of the tough task ahead of him. And just a couple of the critic ratings is IMDb gives it an 8.1 out of 10, Rotten Tomatoes gives it 92%, and Common Sense Media gives it 4 out of 5. So I guess we can start off with something you have to say here, Landon.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I guess I'll start with my first note here. And I just wrote, and this isn't necessarily a good or bad thing, but I wrote, to me anyways, it felt like a generally slower paced film. Especially maybe not so much towards the end, but from the beginning to basically where we kind of get to the climax, it's a it feels very like a slower paced film. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. I just felt like I wanted to point that out. However, what is kind of a negative for me is I did find it a little boring at certain parts throughout the movie, especially in the middle. I found, like, as they always say, the middle is the most important part of your story because the middle is where stories often fall apart. Well, this story doesn't fall apart in the middle. It definitely sags in the middle. It definitely is boring in the middle. And I found there to be about a 15-minute span of the movie around the middle there, when he kind of first starts training, before the montage, of course, where I found myself constantly checking the time button along like the bottom of the screen. So yeah, that's my first note. Slow-paced film, not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a little boring in the middle.
I can agree that it's a slower paced film, but you can kind of expect that. Like, it's a drama and like a character study on Rocky, so you don't expect a whole lot of fast paced action. You expect some slow character building, and I liked that. I didn't find it boring. There was at one point, because he's got that relationship with Adrian. It's Adrian, right?
Yes, I believe it's
Adrian, yeah. First of all, I mean, their relationship I didn't really care for, like, good or bad, but the thing I didn't like is how the relationship started and how he, like, basically forced himself upon her in, like, their apartment. That was just, like, super gross and awkward to watch, and I'm like, it's just not a good
That would
foundation for
not
a
fly by
relationship.
today's
Yeah, that would
standards
not.
at all.
Yeah, and this is like a PG film, and that,
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't,
that
I
was
didn't,
just
I totally agree.
that was just like such an awkward moment, and I just did not like that whatsoever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I actually forgot to write that down, but I totally made note of that when I was watching it. And it was very hard to watch. Like it was like cringy. Okay, so I want to just quickly mention again with the like this kind of has to do with pacing and story, but the building up to the fight was very well done. I really enjoyed that. The training montage, of course, is iconic. It's great. It's legendary. I love that. And the scene of Rocky entering the ring, I think it's the night before the fight. I want to say is maybe it doesn't specify, but it's like when there's the scene where he enters the ring and it's empty except for that one weird guy there. Um, and I found that to be a really powerful moment in the film. And that's kind of where he like loses his confidence or whatever. But I really enjoyed that scene. It was
Yeah,
just,
I really like that
yeah,
scene as well. That was a great scene where we get to again kind of builds on Rocky's character and shows that like while he's trying to be confident and be like, yeah, I can do this, he still has a lot of self-doubt and doesn't think he's gonna be able to do it. And yeah, that was a great scene. And like you said, the montage, iconic. Don't really have a whole lot to say about it that's not been said already. It's a great montage. I like how it parallels his like first training run where like I think he goes almost the exact same route and then he ends up on those stairs and he's like walking at the stairs holding onto his side or whatever, and then at the very end he's like jumping up the stairs and like cheering and stuff, and I really like the parallels there. I think that's great as well.
yeah, for sure. So I'll go for another note here. This is a really, really small point, and I'm not really sure if it really affects my rating whatsoever, but I'm not really sure why they bothered to include the one shot where one of Apollo Creed's trainers is watching the TV and he's watching Rocky on news punching the meat. I thought something was going to happen with this later on. Like I thought maybe Apollo wouldn't want to fight him or he'd get a bad reputation for it or they'd think something more of it. But absolutely nothing came of it. Like it just felt like pointless because it didn't really advance the story or contribute anything to it. It was just kind of there. And it kind of fooled me because I thought maybe we'd refer back to it. Maybe something would come of it. And absolutely nothing did.
I think the point of that scene was to show you that Apollo Creed like just doesn't care at all about the fight. Because like
Okay.
the trainer was trying to show him like, hey, this guy means business, you need to make sure you're prepared for that, and he's just like, yeah, let's just make sure we've got the merch or whatever the heck he was going on about. And it's kind
Right.
of just to show that he's an asshole that doesn't care about Rocky or the fight, and that he just cares about his popularity and his money. That's what I think the purpose of that scene was.
No, for sure. Yeah, I do. I can see that now. Now that you explain it like that, I can definitely see that. And that I didn't really write this down, but that leads me to another point. It actually took me like a really long time to kind of figure out that that was like his like motive was he just wanted to put on the show. He just wanted it all for the publicity. But I didn't really figure that out until like literally the last scene when he's sitting with his trainer and the trainer's like, let's just end this. Let's go home. And he doesn't know it's a show or whatever. And then I figured out that was his motive all along. And I know I should have clued into that like way back. But yeah, for some reason it took me the entire movie to figure out that was Apollo Creed's motives.
I think I figured out probably in the scene that we were just talking about. Like, it's not obvious right away. Like he seems to have good intentions at the start, but like as you actually get to see him, it's like parallels of Rocky's training super hard, and then the scene of Apollo Creed, he's just sitting in an office with his PR agent, like, and like I don't know. I feel like that scene in particular is when I noticed it, and then at the start of the fight, like I think the announcer's saying, "Oh, he's not even trying. He's not in good shape. He's just playing with them, like he's doing like the little jabs at his face or whatever." And yeah,
Yeah, I want to talk quickly now about the scenes with Rocky and Adrian. I enjoyed these for the most part, generally speaking. However, I did find a few of them to be a little boring at times. However, what I did like about them, I guess, is they were a nice contrast from us always seeing Rocky like fighting and training and like being this tough guy and whatnot. And I liked seeing that kind of flip side of him, his more emotional side. I mean, I didn't like the scene where he's, forcing her to stay in his apartment, but later on in the film, when they like are watching that Christmas movie at what's his name, Polly's house, I think was the name of his friend. I like those scenes between them. Even the roller skating scene was kind of nice. because it showed this different side to this character, because he is really like a very nice guy, I think. But at first look, he looks very tough and menacing, right?
Yeah, to add on to that like nice guy thing, obviously he really likes the animals, and like you can tell that he's like softer with the turtles and the dog, and then there's the scene where he's like talking to the birds or whatever as well. And I really like that, and in general he seems to like try to help people as well, because there's that one scene with the like that, I don't know if they named her, but that girl who was sitting with like those smokers or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, he has good intentions. His calling her a whore or whatever, I mean, not the best way of explaining it, but I mean, he's got good intentions at least.
Yeah. All right, so I'll go on to my well, I actually have one more note after this, but I did enjoy the opening scenes, or the first act, I guess you could call it, when we were seeing Rocky's everyday life. Seeing him at work, his job, where he was like a collector or whatever. And then yes, seeing him at the pet store there, and that the first time he enters the pet store and he's with Adrian, he meets Adrian, or I guess he doesn't meet her, but he sees her, he's talking to her, and he's talking to the other lady there. And then he's being like super friendly and nice with all the different animals, and he knows their names and stuff. I thought that was really, really nice, and I thought that was a nice touch for sure.
Yeah, that adds on to my point about the like character driven story, and like how this is just like a character study on Rocky and what type of person he is. And yeah, it's nice to see the fighting stuff. Obviously the fight is like the driving force, but Rocky's character is the underlying thing that makes the story interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely, you're right, like a character driven story, right? Like it's not so much plot driven as it is character, but I don't actually necessarily mind that. In fact, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time I do prefer character driven stories. But it really obviously depends. All right, so my final note is about the ending, because I've talked about the beginning, I've talked about the middle, so I'll talk about the end. I found the end to be just a little bit confusing, because it kind of happens very fast. She's running through the crowd yelling his name. He's trying to like get away from the media and everything, yelling her name. And in the background, we hear like the judge announcing the results of the fight. So I'm still not actually sure, but I'm assuming they tied and that there's supposed to be a rematch, but I could be wrong and Apollo could have won. Yeah, like it all happened very fast and there was a lot going on and it was kind of in the background, but it was very confusing for me, or not very, but a little bit confusing. But am I right in that they tied?
I thought that Apollo won.
You thought he won? Okay. I thought I heard one of Rocky's trainers or whatever say that there was going to be a rematch, something about a rematch, but
I'm just trying to see. Okay, I just searched it up, and Apollo won in a split decision, whatever that means.
Okay. Yeah, I think that maybe that means it wasn't like all the judges didn't agree or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was like greater percentage of them.
Yeah. I was kind of, like you said, like I was kind of, I don't know, underwhelmed, I guess I would say, because like a sports movie, you expect the underdog to win, or I guess like not all sports movies do that, but like
most.
Yeah, like you said, the winner of the fight is kind of just brushed off, and like no one really cares. And I think that's interesting. At first I was like, I don't know, the fight was like the big thing he was working towards, but it was more his, like, again, it's Rocky's story, not the fight. It's Rocky was able to train and better himself as a fighter and I guess a person, and his goal was to make it like through the fight. Like he didn't want to get knocked out or whatever, and he did end up going all 15 rounds. And just a side note, I had no clue boxing went that long. Like I thought it was like 5 rounds or 7 rounds or something. Like,
yeah, my knowledge of boxing is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, but like he made it 15 rounds, and it was like he did the best he could. He was able to hold his own against Apollo Creed, and that was what was important to him. And so it's like a victory for Rocky, even though he didn't win the fight. The important thing was that he feels good about himself and he bettered himself, and I think that that's a really good message.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the ending too, but I just did find it a little confusing. But I got that idea of like, yeah, it wasn't about the fight; it's more about the process of getting there, and then becoming a better person and a better fighter. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our scores now. I'll start with mine. Overall, I did think this was a really good movie. It's obviously it's considered a classic by many. Um, and I did really like it. I did mention a few negatives, like about the middle being boring, the ending being a little bit confusing, but for the most part, I think this is a very good film. And especially for 1976, quality wise, it seemed fine. I didn't really have any issues. Cinematography, sound, all that was kind of fine. I mean, I gave it a final score of 8.5 out of 10. So, Noah, do you want to maybe tell us your score now?
First thing I'm going to say is 1976 isn't really that long ago.
Well, yeah, but
Like,
like comparison to today's standards of like sound design and stuff,
yeah, fair enough.
it's
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
not visually, but sound design, it's a huge difference. And I could definitely tell.
yeah. It just obviously sounds older, but
Yeah.
the only real negative I have is the whole Rocky with Adrian thing. Like, that just left a sour taste in my mouth like the whole time. Like, so that's only the really thing I didn't like about it. I liked everything else for the most part. I think it's really well made. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's really good. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, it's a great film.
All right, great. Again, we're very, very close in scores again. I think last time you were zero point 0.5 ahead of me, and this time you gave zero point 0.5 again higher than me. So our scores always seem to be similar. Our thoughts usually a little different. All right, guys. So that's going to conclude this movie review and this episode of the Farside Podcast. Thank you for watching and joining us today. Next episode will be coming out, of course, next Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed this second episode of the Farside Podcast. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Goodbye.